I knew I was dying there and then, and I knew I was going to hell. You know, people say,
How did you know? How do you know?
I was being drawn from everything that was beautiful, everything that was good, everything that was loving, to this abyss.
Darkness.
Yeah, and it was like the most terrifying moment of my life. So they'd sort of start you off by asking you to pick up a Land Rover.
It's like a stolen vehicle or something.
No, it's full of cocaine.
Full of cocaine.
But we'd be making sure that our guys are running the drugs in the club and no one else is running drugs. So I truly thought I killed this guy. And, you know, I didn't care whether he had a wife, had kids.
Yeah, what would you think when you would look at your own reflection?
Just hated myself, hated the way I was living. It's quite interesting how dark you get.
After all the things you had done, all the people you had hurt, almost killed a person and didn't even care if they had a family or not. How do you know you get the mercy?
At the end of this confession, the priest put his hand on my head, but it wasn't his hand, it was Jesus' hand. And it was almost like I could feel his blood running down my face. I had no doubts how much I had crucified Jesus in all that evil. The devil's wages is far better than God's, but I don't like the devil's pension plan. So now I live for God's.
John Pridmore joins me now in studio, and John, an Irishman meets an Englishman, originally from London.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
What part of London?
I was from the East End, so Hackney.
The East End, Hackney, yeah. For international viewers, describe the area. What kind of environment did you grow up in?
Pretty rough, pretty poor. And my dad was a policeman, so it would have been, my mum was a Catholic, whereas he was an atheist. And so he didn't want us brought up as Catholic. So I was baptised a Catholic, but never brought up. So I never went to Catholic school. Or
he was against it, was he?
Yeah, he was, yeah. Even though he promised when they were getting married that he'd bring us up as Catholic, he relented on it, you know.
So when you were growing up, John, there was no real sense of religion or God in the house?
No, nothing at all.
And when you were a young lad, what did you want to do when you were older? What did you aspire to?
I expect that when I was young, I wanted to help people. I wanted to do something virtuous for people, but maybe be a policeman or something like that, which was quite strange in the paths that I took, as you know.
Yeah, because you were then running from the policemen.
Yeah. So at the age of 10, I think it was the turning point. When my parents asked me to choose who I wanted to live with, because they were getting divorced, my whole world seemed to collapse.
What age were you then?
10. And so it was like the two people who I always thought would be there, looking after me and taking care of me. Suddenly I've got to choose between them, and I couldn't choose. And I think unconsciously, when I look back, that's when I made the decision not to love anymore.
And did they put that decision on you? Did they
say,
very
John,
much. That is exactly. You've got to choose which one.
Yeah, they asked us to come up into the bedroom. My brother was up there actually, who's older than me, and he was crying. And they said that you've got to choose who you want to live with. And I was 10 and obviously couldn't.
It's devastating for a child. And so tough upbringing, John, in that kind of.
Yeah, well, my mum actually ended up having a nervous breakdown and went to psychiatric hospital. I think because of a lot of the guilt over the marriage. My dad remarried, and my stepmom thought the best way of bringing up a kid was like beating them each day. So that was my upbringing. And there was a lot of violence. My dad, being a policeman, when I started stealing at about 13, I think I was a cry of help.
Yeah.
But it was like that he really took it as a shame on his profession, because obviously everyone knew I was getting in trouble.
And then
and then at 15 I was put in prison, youth prison.
They were saying he can't even police his own son.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I think his violence went to a higher level because of that. Do you know what I mean?
And do you know, even in your young mind, why you decided to turn, even at 13 years of age, to crime and to stealing? You said there that you decided, no one loves me, my parents don't love each other, I'm not going to love anyone else.
Yeah, and I think it was, in some ways, when I look back, I think it was to get at my dad, and I think it was to annoy him, but I think it was also a cry for help. That, you know, it's funny that I've worked with a lot of kids and they seem to think getting in trouble is a better cry for help than being good, because no one takes a blind bit of notice of you if you're good. But everyone seems to be concerned if you start getting in trouble. So that was my sort of... So because I was in prison at 15, a youth prison, I left home at 15. And so because I didn't want to live in that environment of, so I actually was on the streets from 15.
No, really? Wow, from 15. And when you had to go into prison, John, did it bother you, or did you think, this is kind of cool? You know, in that part of London growing up, I'm a bad guy, I'm a tough guy, it's glamorized in movies. I'm a gangster in the making here.
No, I think this is probably why I was never meant to be a gangster. I was petrified.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I really did not want to go to prison. And, I was petrified. And when I got there, I actually realised that prison was safer than being at home because I didn't get the beatings, I didn't get, so much violence. I was only in for, we called it bed and breakfast, 6 months, But
B&B.
Yeah, exactly. But when I came out, again, I really felt that, no one gives you anything, so you just take in life, you know what I mean? There's not giving. And
the strong survive, and it's each man for his own.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that sort of ruthlessness that you start getting into. And even at that age, I started going down glue sniffing and, all the sort of... Because you can't afford the quality drugs.
The good stuff, yeah.
You take all the really bad drugs,
And I heard you say in your testimony that you gave earlier here on the stage behind us that you looked up to gangsters because they were the ones who got the best looking girls. They were going around with the expensive jewelry. They had the nice cars and they were successful. People looked up to them.
Very much. Like, it's interesting that even my dad as a policeman, he seemed to have more, he used to speak about the good criminals in a better way than he spoke about the good, honest people. So even from his point of view, I felt that there was a real glamour in gangsterism. And so, so I think that I always aspired to be someone who was in that world, but didn't like the prison or the other side of it.
So you were like, I
like
want
the
to live
luxury and I like the, but I didn't like the, the sort of any pain. I'm not into pain.
You liked all the money and the glamour and the successful trappings of being a good gangster, but you didn't want the prison.
No. So I went in prison again at about 19. And that time was a lot of solitary confinement because by that time I think the more you open yourself up to evil and that sort of taking and not wanting to give, the more it takes over you. And so at that time I was really very violent, and so I was put in solitary confinement for the whole prison sentence, and it was just a bit like the caged animal where you just got the mirror in front of you and all you see is you hate. So I truly thought about taking my own life.
Yeah, what would you think when you would look at your own reflection?
Just hated myself, hated the way I was living. It's quite interesting how dark you get, because even when I was thinking of taking my own life, the only reason I was doing it was anger at the people who had hurt me, thinking they'd be upset because I'm dead. It's a crazy, sort of evil way of looking at things, but that was, how I had become.
It's funny that I remember someone said once, having hatred or bitterness towards someone is like drinking poison yourself but expecting the other person to die.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think the person who I found it hardest to forgive was my parents and my step-mum particularly,
When you come out of prison then again, could you feel that battle between good and evil? I know looking back now you can intellectualize
I think,
it,
to
but
be
then...
honest, by that point I wasn't even interested in good. Do you know what I mean? I think by that point I really thought that you just need to be ruthless if you want anything out of this world. So it got darker and darker from the first prison sentence to the second.
Taking drugs?
Yeah, and so probably the first day I was out of prison, I was taking drugs again. And I was asked, because I was quite a big guy and I was also known for being quite violent, I was asked to do some bouncing at one of these clubs. And it was a West End club. And these guys who asked me, they walked anywhere. They had this reputation, they had this
You don't mess
glamour.
with them.
Yeah, everyone stopped, even in like one of the big clubs that they ran was Stringfellas. And, you walk in Stringfellas, one of the most exclusive clubs in the world, and these guys, they walk it and everyone stops, even in Stringfellas, because they know exactly who they are. They know what sort of credible, and I wanted that.
They know what they're capable of, and you
and
wanted that too.
So they'd sort of start you off by asking you to pick up a Land Rover from Dover, and they give you the keys, tell you where it is, and you get paid like $5,000 for bringing it back to London in them days. Like, I'm 19.
It was like a stolen vehicle or something.
No, it's full of cocaine.
Full of cocaine, right?
But yeah, and I, obviously worked that out. But but in a very short space of time, you're not actually doing jobs for them, but you're doing jobs with them. And you get your own credibility, you get your own sort of contacts. And by the age of 27, penthouse apartment, more money at times than I could possibly
Really?
spend.
How much money were you making?
So I remember watching a cricket game with my dad, who was a policeman, and we're watching this cricket game, and on the phone, I made £30,000.
30,000.
And that is, I'm 62 now, so you can work it out. How much that would have been worth
Back
now.
in those days. Did your dad know what you were involved in?
It is interesting. I remember him saying, we used to go to this working man's club, West Ham, and because I wasn't into football, but he was, and a few other people. And I remember I was having a bit of a row with the bookie. They had a bent bookie, a betting man who would take the bet. And I remember having a bit of row because he owed me a lot of money, and he was obviously not but he said he'd pay me. And my dad just said, yeah, you better, because he's got a sawn-off in the boot.
Yeah.
And I thought, how does he know I've got a sawn-off in the boot?
So your dad kind of accepted it as well, and
I think he was actually quite impressed that I was so high up.
he was proud that you had
organised
achieved something, although achieved it in the wrong
Exactly,
area of
and
life.
I think that was the whole twistedness of, thankfully he had a big conversion on his deathbed, but at that time he was more glamorised by gangsterism than he was by, like I say, being honest. And
There was one point, John, as well, where you believed you had killed someone. You
Yeah.
believed you had actually taken a
Yeah.
life, and you were fine by it.
It was like in that lifestyle, there's a lot, because I was sort of paid to enforce debts, and so if someone owed money and they wasn't paying my bosses, I had to enforce it. So it was a paid enforcer, and also we done all the security in all the clubs. So even though we wouldn't be on the doors, but we'd be making sure that our guys are running the drugs in the club and no one else is running drugs. So every day was violence, because if anyone tried to put drugs in our clubs, we were the people who had to hurt them so they wouldn't come back. And so it was that sort of so it wasn't unusual violence, but in this case I truly thought I killed this guy. And the only reason I hit him with these sort of brass knuckles was because an Underworld boss was there, my Underworld boss, because you have to be the most violent, you have to do most, crazy.
The most amount of damage.
Yeah, and because if you don't, you lose your reputation.
Because it's jungle law, the strong,
Exactly.
the strongest prevails.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember I had the honour of meeting St. Mother Teresa years later, and I don't know, maybe you remember, but they made a really bad programme, all lies, on Channel 4 about her. And one of the sisters came up to Mother and said, you need to fight these people because they're taking away your reputation.
Yeah.
And I always remember St. Mother Teresa said, my reputation, one less cross for me to carry.
Yes.
Probably the most famous person in the world at that time.
Yeah.
And I thought I was willing to kill for my reputation. And there's one of the holiest people and famous, and she thinks her reputation is a cross. And it's just the pride and the ego in that life that you want that glamour. So I truly thought I killed this guy, and I didn't care whether he had a wife, had kids. The only thing I was thinking, I might get 10 years for this, because I knew I wouldn't be done for murder, but I'd be done for grievous bodily harm or
so you were looking at it like a business thing. You were costing it out
totally.
in your head.
All
Okay,
calculated, all dark.
I've killed him. I might have to do a couple of years in prison, but I've gained this amount of street cred, so when I come back out, that's elevated.
Exactly, and it really sort of threw me and there's another, I think that's when God was starting to step in, because it was almost like, how can I actually kill someone and not even care? How twisted and dark have I become?
Yeah, where does God come into your life then? Because it sounds like, what's the problem?
Well,
you're dodging the police, you're making loads of money, you've got the respect.
I think because there's that fear that evil's taking you over. And I think somewhere deep in, because I was baptized, maybe it's the baptism, I don't know what it is, but there was some sort of cry that I was losing my soul.
To evil.
To evil, definitely. It's in my book actually, but I even said to a mate of mine, and Gary was still in touch actually, but I even said to a mate of mine, what do you do when you just want to end it? Because I just thought, I've done, another day of this. And I remember him saying, you have to fight on. And that I didn't go down that line again of suicide. But I came in this normal night, probably about a week or 10 days after that event. and I absolutely knew that I was having an heart attack. And with all the cocaine and drugs I was taking, it wasn't surprising. But I knew I was dying there and then, and I knew I was going to hell. You know, people will say
How did
to
you
me,
know? How do you know?
I was being drawn from everything that was beautiful, everything that was good, everything that was loving, to this abyss.
Darkness.
Yeah, and it was like the most terrifying moment of my life. I always, you know, in nowadays, people say to me, and I always laugh, they say, when I meet God, I'll give him the peace of my mind.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, if this judgment that I had was anything to go by, there is no two-way conversation. with God. I knew it was right, I knew it was proper, and I cried out for another chance. Not because I was sorry, because I didn't know repentance, I wasn't thinking, but I was being shown everything I had done, and the things that I was being shown wasn't the things you would think. You know, it wasn't just the violence, but it was using girls and, you know, the manipulation and the sort of all taking and feeding yourself.
Yeah.
And I was being drawn away from everything that was light into this abyss. And I knew, absolutely, and I cried out because I didn't want to go to hell. And the minute I cried out, I just felt lifted up, and it was like I was, I just knew I had to get out of this apartment, out of this flat. And as I walked out, I remember saying the first prayer I'd
Still
ever
with that
said,
tightness in your chest?
everything, yeah. And I knew that God had brought me back. And I said this first prayer, and I just said, up to now, all I've done is take from you, God. Now I want to give. And as I said that prayer, that emptiness, that, you know, void in my life, which I was trying to fill with the drugs and the sex and everything else, was just filled with the Holy Spirit. And it lasted no more than maybe a minute, but in that minute, it was the purest, most beautifulest love I'd ever felt.
Was that the moment your life changed forever?
I think it was, because at that point, I knew that God was real. I knew that he loved me. Through his love, I felt it. And I also knew he had a plan for me. Somewhere inside, I knew this wasn't the plan, and he had a plan for me.
It was like a lightning moment for you. It was...
And you know, I think it was Albert Einstein said, there's no such thing as coincidence, there's only God instance. So the only person I knew who had faith was my mum. So this night, most day, I would avoid her. And I'd give her an expensive present after a month if I hadn't seen her for a month, because I was just ashamed of how I was living. But I was rich, so I could give her a really expensive present. I always remember she used to say, I don't want your presents because I know where they've come from. So mums know.
Of course.
But I went round and I said, Mum, I found God. And I remember she immediately said, come in. And she just said, I've prayed for you every single day of your life. And 9 days before this, I prayed a novena to the patron saint of hopeless cases, St. Jude. And it
hopeless
was
cases, yeah.
Yeah, and it was the very 9th night of her novena that I had that realisation that I was going to hell. And you know, the prayer she said, which I didn't say earlier, but the prayer she said was, from one mother to another, save my soul's son. Wow. And if he needs to die, don't let him hurt anyone else except let him die rather than hurt anyone else. So it was like, I know how much my mum loved me. And for her to pray that prayer, to actually say, let her son die, rather than
desperation.
keep on. Yeah, because she deeply knew how much pain and misery I was causing. So
Very difficult then, though, to turn your life around, because all of your friends are the gang members. You have a reputation now. You have money that you owe to people and people owe to you. I mean, you're caught up in that lifestyle. How do you break out of it?
Yeah, I remember that obviously I was still taking drugs and stuff like that. And so I remember on one night, I was so sick of myself. I had a big row with someone. This is a few weeks afterwards. And I went to this sea, you know, like the seaside, and it was a massive storm. And I remember saying to God at this storm, if I can't live and be yours anymore, then I don't want to live. Let one of these waves just crash me over. And when I was 16, I had a motorbike accident and I was in hospital. And I remember this priest came to visit me in hospital, and his name was Father Brian and O'Higgins. And his name popped into my heart. And so I thought, right. So I went and saw my mum, and I said, how'd you find a priest, Father Brian, who visited me? She said, well, ask Father Hall, who's the local priest. I didn't really know him, but he was a West Ham supporter, so I liked him.
Yeah.
So I went and told him.
He supported the right team.
Yeah. So I went and told him that I'd like to, and he told me where. And I remember I went to Father Brian. I didn't tell him too much, but he told me he'd been praying for me since I was 16.
The power of prayer.
But I said to him that I'm involved in a bit of organised crime.
Yeah.
And all that.
And when I say a bit, that's putting it mildly.
Yeah,
You know?
and he said to me this, you're a closet Christian, come out the closet.
Wow.
You're a closet Christian, come out the closet. You need to tell people.
But the funny thing is, when we talk about Jesus' mercy, Jesus also wants justice. Justice is mercy.
Very much.
And it would mean, you would have to face harsh realities of going to people, trying to make right terrible wrongs that you had done.
That was a disaster, that
yeah,
whole side.
how did you deal with that?
First of all, I had to tell my boss that I wanted to come out. And so when I did say that, obviously I would have been shot. But he said that it was his insurance policy that he gave me permission, which really meant if anyone shot me, then his guys would shoot them. And he says it's his insurance policy because if God's real, he owes him. And I honestly believe that his insurance policy kicked in because on his deathbed, I know this is Divine Mercy, he was praying the Divine Mercy with me. He died 12 years ago. I gave him a card years and years later. I used to visit him regularly. He came out of all the organised crime because his wife had a stroke.
Okay.
And I gave him a Divine Mercy card which said, sooner would heaven and earth fade away than one soul wanting to receive my mercy be refused. And when he read that card, he said, I haven't got anything to worry about. And I said, not if you trust Jesus. But on that thing of redemption, I remember I thought there's some guys who I'd really hurt, and so I better go and apologise. And when I went to apologise, they were more terrified and I just realised God wasn't asking me to go and apologise
to every single person.
Yeah,
I'm sure it was a long list.
And to give my life to him so that I could stop others making the same mistakes as him.
I remember hearing someone being asked this question, and I thought it was interesting. You obviously call out for Jesus' mercy. How do you know you receive it? After all the things you had done, all the people you had hurt, almost killed a person and didn't even care if they had a family or not. How do you know you get the mercy?
It's interesting that when I went to a retreat, one of the priests invited me to a retreat. And at that retreat, I went to confession. And during the confession, the only way I can describe it, it was like, and I left nothing out. I was totally honest. I was there an hour. And at the end of this confession, the priest put his hand on my head, but it wasn't his hand, it was Jesus' hand. And it was almost like I could feel his blood running down my face. I had no doubts how much I had crucified Jesus in all that evil. But I also knew that it was a total free gift, that he had died so that I might be completely set free. And I remember I cried for 3 days after that confession. I could not stop crying because it was almost like all that darkness, all that evil just being washed out of me. I just could not stop crying.
You heard that you were forgiven, but you felt it inside.
I felt it. I think it's the sacrament. It's a supernatural grace. That's why I say to people, we might receive God's mercy when we die without the sacrament of confession if we're truly sorry. But in the sacrament of confession, we can taste it while we're alive. And I think that was the turn. You said was the thing in the flat. I'd say the confession was the turning point of truly knowing that I could be forgiven. Now, I didn't forgive myself at that
that's
time.
A different,
that's a different journey, as you know.
Yeah.
But I absolutely knew supernaturally that I had been forgiven by Jesus. And that's when I wanted to pay back. Because obviously you think nothing's free, so you have to give back. And so I think I started my desire, that's why I ended up going to the Bronx in New York with the Franciscans of the Renewal.
They're fantastic guys.
That's where I met Saint Mother Teresa of Calcutta.
Did your friends in the old gangster world think that you had lost your marbles? Some of them, when they see you, one day you're a rough, tough gangster, the bouncer of the nightclub, beating people to within an inch of their life, and then Next thing you're walking
To
around
be
Mother
honest,
Teresa and you're talking about Jesus. They must have
Well,
thought.
to be honest, I didn't hang around. Like
didn't
you
hang
can't,
around.
you know, because I had my boss's permission. It meant that I had to get away. You know, I couldn't stay. But 12 years later, when he died, his son, who more or less took over the empire, he had just come out of prison actually. But he said to me he wanted me to speak at his dad's funeral. And I knew that it was there'll be a massive, a bit like, I don't know if you know the Craze, like one of their funerals. This is what it was there'll be like it, but this is like much more modern. And I remember that I was really scared of actually sharing my story because I knew most of these guys who were there would either know about me or work with me. And it was one of the hardest things I ever did actually.
Really?
But
being in front of your old peers.
yes, and to really not to pretend, not to give it the macho
not
bit.
to water it down.
But real. And I remember a few of them were laughing and mocking me, but a few of them were crying, and a few of them said I had a lump in my throat. And these guys, most of them have killed people
Because of resonating with them on some deep
yeah,
level.
and I think that was the real bit where I stepped out, and I just couldn't care. That life was hell. This life is, you know, everything that's beautiful and good.
Finally, I was going to say finally. I just did say finally, but I'm going to say it like 3 or 4 times because I could talk to you for hours here, John. But your view on humanity and people. I remember interviewing a former undercover agent for the FBI who was working in the Bronx with people who were selling like fake driver's licenses and then some drugs. And he said some of the people you dealt with, you could just see how they fell on the wrong side of things because of their upbringing, and you could have empathy for them in some way. He said, now there were others that I dealt with in Wall Street, for example, who would kill their granny just for money. They were addicted to money and power. He said it was incredible, just that spectrum. But dealing with these terrible gangsters in London, I mean, you stayed close to your old boss. Do you see God in some of what they did, or goodness, or were there redeeming factors in that world, or is it all hopeless? Or
Yeah, I think you know, one of the guys who I always thought was quite a nice guy in that life, and you know, I realised when I found God, he was probably the most evil out of all of them. So your discernment is completely twisted. Do you know what I mean? The people who, you know, because you've got you've got evil all over you.
Yeah.
So I think, but since obviously I found God, I just think that there's a lot of wounded people out there. And one person said, "There's no such thing as a bad person. There's just people who don't know Jesus." And I always feel that, you know, if someone asked me actually today, why do you really feel strongly about going in schools? It was on the radio earlier. And I said, because if someone had spoke in my school and actually told me the truth in mercy, the same as I try and tell the truth in schools, but I do tell the truth about the Eucharist, confession and the teachings of the church, then maybe I wouldn't have lived the hell I lived. And so I really believe that if people are given the truth, they have the choice to choose the truth. If they're never given the truth, they never. And so one guy who writes to me, he's in prison, he's never getting out, he's killed 2 or 3 people. And he says, I'm told that I'm surrounded by vicious animals, but all I see are wounded little children. Now he knows what they've done, and no one's, you know, justifying.
Or
He's in the right
excusing.
place. No,
Yeah.
exactly, because evil's evil. And, you know, I was evil. I was, you know, the only Trinity I was involved in was the unholy Trinity, me, myself and I. Take. But so no one's excusing the evil. But deep down, I truly believe that everyone's created for heroic virtue. And once they know Jesus, they know his love, they know, and I've seen it where some of these so-called monsters turn into the greatest disciples of God. Just read the Bible.
Yeah. And let's say a young person is watching this now, John, and they're saying, I want to turn my life around as well. I want to get out of this mess that I'm in. I know that I want to be a good person. But this whole thing about Jesus and believing in the Eucharist, divine mercy, that's double Dutch to me. It's alien. I could never believe in that or get my head around it. Can I just do it without that?
To be honest, I think that if you want to know what God wants, he wants everything. And so, but he's willing to give us everything in return. So the minute you open your heart to him, the minute you ask him, maybe in the bit where you're the most vulnerable, the bit you cry out to him, he always answers. But then you have to give him everything. And the more you give him, the more you taste heaven on earth. I've never been so happy or fulfilled, and I really mean it. I'm not just saying it out of a whiff. I have never been so happy or fulfilled. The devil's wages is far better than God's, but I don't like the devil's pension plan. So now I live for God's.
And isn't it amazing the path that life can bring you down, that you're a gangster in the West End of London at one point in your life, and then here we are sitting at the Divine Mercy Congress during a break of the main event in Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania.
I know, it's incredible. You know, since I found God, I've been to 56 countries doing talks and all that. Before I was with God, I had so much money, but I wouldn't go away because I was too greedy to lose money. So, you know, you never enjoy it.
And sticking with Mother Teresa for a moment, I know when she was in New York, up in the Bronx, and she had been all around New York, but of course the poverty was up there in the Bronx, and reporters asked her, Mother Teresa, what do you think of the poverty you have seen? And she said, I've never seen anything like it. The people are so poor, all they have is money. She was talking about the people in Manhattan she had seen, Lower Manhattan. And it just stopped everyone in their tracks. So finally, sorry, John, you're about to say something there?
Yeah, I was just going to say that the thing that touched me about Mother Teresa was, and I said earlier, but she's the first ever person I met who had no fear of anything. And I knew instantly that I was in the presence of someone who was fearless. I actually saw her tell off the then President of the United States like a little schoolboy for his appalling record of pro-life. And but I just saw her fearlessness. And when I reflected why she had no fear, I realised that pure love, it was 97 when I met her, the same year she died. So she was already a saint.
Yes.
And she was filled with God.
That's amazing.
And pure love drives out all fear. And I honestly say to any viewers out there, the more we open our heart to his love, the more we really turn to his mercy and share that mercy, it eradicates fear from our lives. And that's the greatest gift in my life. That now, if there's a knock on the door at 7:30, I know it's the postman. I know I'm not, and I have very little fear in my life now.
And when you go into a prison now, the good thing is that you can leave at your own free will.
When I want to leave, and I say this to the guys, now they're asking to open the gate, and they open it.
And you can leave at your free will,
and
which
on
is
that
great.
note, one guy who I... just recently, I was in Parkhurst prison, who you probably know, on the Isle of Wight, notorious prison. But I said to one of the guys, I was signing a book for him, I said, how long you got left? And he said, 24 Christmases.
24 Christmases.
24 Christmases. And as I was driving off, because you have to get the ferry, I was just thanking God.
Quarter of a century. And it could have been you.
Very much.
Easily could have been you. And isn't it amazing when we talk about Mother Teresa, Saint Faustina, who we're here celebrating Divine Mercy, how
Thank God
ordinary,
for the
simple people can do great things and leave. Saint Faustina, Sister Faustina from Poland, simple woman here in Lithuania.
As I said earlier,
Mother Teresa from Albania.
the guy who taught me the chaplet of Divine Mercy was a skinhead involved in crime and drugs, and he became a Franciscan.
Isn't
and he was in the order of...
the one you would least expect
Yes.
when you pass them on the street.
Yeah, and he was in Benedict Groshel's order.
John, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I'm going to ask you your final question. You said that some people, when they meet God, they say that they're going to give him a piece of their mind. Now, I'm going to say, just give me a second to explain. Let me explain. What are you going to say when you get to the pearly gates?
Thank you. Thank you. You know? Every time I see a statue of St. Peter, I just give him a little tap and say, please let me in. But yeah, thank you if I get in.
John, it's a pleasure talking to you.
God bless you.
Thank you so much.
And all your viewers.
That was a good rehearsal. Let's record that now when you're ready.